Adtech moves fast. Yesterday's innovation is today's warm-up act. Welcome to Legends of Adtech, the podcast where we go beyond the buzzwords and straight to the people at the cold face of digital adtech. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with the industry's boldest thinkers, pioneers and disruptors to find out how they're rewriting the game. This is their story.
Welcome back to Legends of Adtech, the podcast where we spotlight the brilliant minds defining the adtech industry. I'm Julia Linehan, founder and CEO of The Digital Voice, and today we're joined by a guest who turns raw data into gold. Leila Seith-Hassan is the Chief Data Officer at Digitas and a true alchemist when it comes to transforming numbers into narratives that really drive global impact. Her career is exceptional and expands the world from Australia to USA, across Europe and now the UK, and working with powerhouse brands like American Express, Nestle, GSK and IBM. She's a fierce advocate for ethical AI and diversity in STEM, helping to shape how our industry approaches responsibility and inclusion. She's also been named as Beamer 100 Champion for Change, a Data IQ Top 100 leader, and chairs the DMA's Marketing Ethics Committee, where she's redefining the meaning of doing the right thing with data. Leila, a very warm welcome to Legends of Adtech.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction.
You're very, very welcome here. And we're really looking forward to this session just because there's so much to unpack. But we're going to give you the challenge we give to all our guests. If you can, in 60 seconds or less, tell us about Leila, the journey that got you here and what led you to becoming, I suppose, a magician of turning data into gold. Go for it.
It was, I say, the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I studied marketing and economics, and when I was at university in Australia, I was at a competition, and a judge came up to me afterwards, handed me a business card and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for me when you graduate?" I had no idea what the company was. I considered myself silly to not take up the offer. It turns out he was the CEO of WPP in Australia. So I ended up moving and taking a job working for Ogilvy. And that's how I ended up in advertising and media, even though I hadn't really a clue what it was. I did, however, quite quickly realize that there was a bit of a gap. I remember going to a kind of direct marketing house and going, why aren't we using data? Why are we re-cleaning? Why aren't we analyzing what we're doing? And it ended up pivoting me into data roles. And after the first one, I just fell in love. I never looked back, and now worked in Australia. I went to New York. I worked for a little while in Atlanta, in Paris, and now I'm in London. And all stemming from this idea of, wow, you can really use data to drive decisions in marketing. And actually that is incredibly exciting and interesting. And I just consider myself so fortunate to tie it back to, someone giving me a business card and then ending up on this path to where I am today.
I think it's exceptional that you had that ability to see where data could take companies. When you first made that decision of doing data and economics, wasn't it, at uni?
It was marketing and economics. So when I studied, data didn't exist like it did today. There was no data science degree. There was no, at least in Australia anyway, on the marketing side, we never talked about how data was used in the context of marketing. It was always things like, the 5 kind of P's, the hierarchy of needs. It was all of that really good stuff that was quite grounding, but data science, insights wasn't a foundational element that you see today when you talk about marketing. I loved marketing because I liked the idea of understanding how consumers used products and kind of interacted with brands. But then the thing I loved about economics was, how do you get people to respond to different types of incentives? And actually, if you bring the two together, that is the field of data and analytics in the context of marketing. Why do people respond to incentives to engage with a brand, to buy products and services? Like, what does that kind of relationship and equation look like? And so ending up in a place that allowed me to do both when there was no explicit name for it. There were researchers, but research is a different thing to, I think, what we do today in analytics. So I would love to say that I had the foresight back then to go, this is what it would be. But actually, I think it was a series of events and a series of things that I liked all coming together at exactly the right moment to put me the right place to have this this incredible career.
I think it's really interesting because there's a phrase, isn't there? Show me the data, or maybe that's a phrase, certainly a phrase I use.
No, I use that, yeah.
Yeah, you let the data as well be the guide of the success of what you're doing. Is there any element, Leila, that actually data's had maybe a negative impact on? And I mean that from so far as that we're losing that. And I just watched this it was during Christmas. It was the Coca-Cola ad was all done using AI, and they must have obviously been led by data points that led them to do it for a second year running. Now, for me, that wasn't a success in comparison to the very human John Lewis ad that we all saw over Christmas. Are there any negative sides to data, both in that instance where it comes to marketing, and are there any? And there's a second question then: are there any negative stereotypes and connotations that's going on in the field of data? Two different questions there.
There's always been a reluctance to move too far away from kind of creativity and ideas to a world where data decides everything. And I remember at least 10 years ago having debates with creatives in New York about, they saw me as coming in and I guess kind of handicapping them or kind of tying them up in chains because they saw my role as coming in and saying, well, no, you shouldn't do that creative. You should test it with this creative. And then I'll tell you what's the better creative before you've done it. And they're going, well, that doesn't tell me if something's a good idea or not. I don't think that that's the role of data in the context of big ideas and kind of big kind of how you think about how a brand shows up in the world. That's the kind of work where we're talking about, assets that are being delivered across thousands of variations and you are trying to optimize in real time. And they're two very different things. The role of data and insight in the context of, these big ideas is how does it help and enable and superpower what people are doing? How does it show them an insight or uncover something that they didn't already know because we can see that with data? I always think that the reason I've loved data is I feel like it's, hunting for treasure, and data is kind of your map. And at the end of it, there's a pot of gold, which is like an insight. And if you find that pot of gold, you're able to do things that your competitors didn't do, things that surprise consumers, that, make something that ultimately connects with them in such a human and real way. And they're two very different roles of how data works, I think, in our industry. And we don't need to conflate the two. The two can be useful and true. And as long as they serve their different purposes, we'll get value out of them. What has happened with the kind of Coke ad, which, there's a lot of backlash on a few different fronts, but the thing that I see as being problematic, although their argument is that this is the world we're moving to, is that they've basically used AI to replace humans. And that is probably the start of people going, is that the industry starting to disappear? Is that starting to go? And at the moment, the way that Coke has done their Christmas ads is so formulaic that they kind of can just pick up what they've done before and go, well, here's the model that we do every year. Now let's just do it with AI and it's going to be more efficient for us. And therefore, they're saying it's just as effective. I would argue that there's a huge efficiency measure that's sitting under there as well. That's not going to hold true if they ever need to fundamentally change what they're trying to do. What they've done is they've taken AI and kind of rinse and repeated a structure that they've had before.
It wasn't even that dissimilar. It was
the
laziest form of marketing. And ultimately, you say it's rinse and repeat. And absolutely, AI is great because you just press a button and go, slightly tweak this up and make it slightly different, but with the same. So lazy marketing.
Exactly. And I think people are right to be frustrated by that, because what they've done is ultimately tried to spin up an advert as being something other than it's not. It's not a creative advert. It's an AI advert that's copying a format that they've done before. that won't work in the future. That won't work for a John Lewis Christmas ad, because the reason people love them, and I loved this year's as well. I was lovely. I mean, they almost always make me cry, which is, I think, the point,
absolutely.
right?
I was considering, because I was a raver back in the 1990s as well, and I've got children that are now 18 and 19, so I was in bits.
You're done, yeah. But AI is not going to do that anytime soon. It's such a real human insight. So that's not changing anytime soon, rightly so. So I kind of look at that and go, they've Coke, I think, missed the mark in terms of what they were telling people they were trying to do. And that is problematic. And there's lots of examples of where that's happened historically, and will likely continue to happen. But ultimately, with everything, data can be good and it can also be bad, but it's less about inherently the data and more about how people are using it or trying to use it, trying to frame it, that makes it so.
There's an interesting thought there, which is, I bet for you as well, it's that don't shoot the messenger. You described it as there's a map and at the end is a pot of gold. But ultimately, when data gives you the results you don't want to hear, that's probably often why data gets a bad rap, and the people who are making those decisions. I think has that ever been, have you felt like that?
Oh, absolutely. But I kind of love it, because you'll be in rooms and meetings where people are just vehemently disagreeing with you, and you're just sitting there going, it's a fact. This isn't a discussion.
I got the evidence. Yeah. I can show you.
And at that moment, and I tell this to people in my team sometimes, they're like, what do I do? And it's like, just sit back. It's not up for debate. It's not a discussion. It's not subjective. It's a fact. And that's what's so wonderful about it. You can debate if you want to use that fact, but it's a fact. And you kind of just leave it there and give it some air. It's a wonderful feeling.
So this is interesting, and obviously we're running a PR, and we're PR and events and marketing and social. We're all about words and pictures, okay? So I'm curious really as to what is the most important skill now in the industry? Is it words, pictures, or numbers? Because even in that scenario you've just talked about, the people who do the words and pictures are going, no, it's amazing and we love it. And the numbers people are going, no, it's not right. So what is the most important skill out of those three, do you think?
I'm going to give you the answer that's, it's true, but you need all three. You can't do numbers without putting a story around it, because at the end of the day, even though we're saying a fact, if no one takes our fact and does something with that fact, then what's the point of having the fact? So you have to be able to dress up a fact in a story that is often kind of pictures and words based to make people understand or kind of embody what impact that means and why that is so powerful. I think where the industry is going is people that are lean to one area, obviously, but are able to sit somewhat or have a greater understanding of all three. So people in the data capability have to have an understanding of how their work impacts kind of anyone that's sitting in a much more strategic or creative side. And people that are going to be really good at creative and strategy are ones that can take the numbers and bring that into their work and make it even better. And then we get into, AI and how does that layer of AI play into it? And I say to that, it will supercharge all of those three roles. It won't replace them, it will just change them. And so the people that are really going to be ready for the future are the ones that embrace how AI is helping to supercharge their role, superpower them as an expert to be able to do their role in a different fashion moving forward.
So you mentioned impact just then. You mentioned impact in a number of different ways, but I wonder if there is what you have seen as really the area of where data has had the most positive impact on our industry. What is it?
It's a very good question. I think it's getting us to a place that's making our whole industry more representative. And the answer I imagine you're expecting was how does it change the work? But I think where it's had a bigger impact, and this is slightly different data than, the data I use for marketing. I think the biggest impact it's had, it's made us reflect and go, is the industry representative of the markets in which we are? So we are now able to see, the types of consumers that any given brand is kind of marketing towards or has as customers, we're also able to see the makeup of our agencies and our companies. And if you look historically, they were very much aligned. However, they weren't necessarily reflective of the markets in which they were in. And now I think what data is able to give us is in lots of different ways, but I think that this is the most impactful in terms of changing the world. We are able to see that, you know, perhaps who we've been marketing to and who have been in our agencies aren't necessarily representative or reflective of the entirety of the UK or the entirety of the world. And so just having the ability to understand all of the different versions of what make up a market or a country, and therefore changing how we communicate, changing the products and services that we deliver, I think that has been absolutely transformative. And then obviously beyond that, you've got, you know, we've got better insights, we're more efficient, we're more effective, we can optimize all of those other things, and they're fantastic. But actually, if you go 30 years ago, who were we marketing to and why were we marketing to them, and who was working in our agencies and our companies, and then you look at today, they're two very, very different places. And that has been because we can see, like, we know who these consumers are, and we know the value of these consumers, and we also know the value of having representative agencies that are able to deliver and understand the consumers that our brands are ultimately trying to reach now.
Well, it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it's like representative of our industry. And I was wondering if you see your current role as Chief Data Officer kind of reflected in other agencies. You know, is everybody going, actually, yeah, we've got representative, yes, we respect the value of data, yes, there's a role there. Let's talk about that first, and then there's a few more questions I have for you on this.
Yes, but with the caveat that not all agencies have a chief data officer that looks, and when I say look, I mean what their job description is, like their remit is not the same. So if you go to a heavily weighted creative agency, then their remit is going to be quite skewed towards developing insights that help fuel these big ideas. You know, they help produce the John Lewis ads of the world. They help kind of the kind of creative and strategic capabilities do incredible work. And then if you go to something more like a media agency, and, you know, I'm a Publicis group, so we have end to end of this. When you get to more the media agency side, it's, you know, how do we deliver, optimize, and do the most efficient and effective media we possibly can. Digitas is, and this is another reason I just have loved this role and have been there for so long, we straddle all of it. So we are, you know, creative, technology, media, strategy, and data, which means that my remit ends up spanning end to end. So I have people that are looking at the insights that help fuel the amazing creative work that we're doing. We have people that are trying to improve the media capability and the work that we're delivering there, and doing some fantastic kind of efficiency optimization work around media. We work with a lot of clients building out their internal analytics capability. So that can be everything from, you know, how are they reporting on trading? It can be how's CRM working? And then at the other end, we have, you know, your data scientists, your engineers, your AI experts that are embedding that throughout all of the capabilities we're doing from a data perspective, but then also embedding that in the agency as well. So there is absolutely a role of chief data officer everywhere, but the makeup of what that is depends very much on the agency, and therefore we're not all chief data officers necessarily created equal at the moment.
Digitas is obviously part of Publicis, and I think I'd be right in saying that out of all the whole agency holding companies, they're the one holding their own. And I think it's the fact that you've given them such credit for recognizing what that role should be. I suppose what is Publicis doing as a holding company that others aren't? Is it just in that area, or does it go beyond that you've looked around you left and right and seen that they're just getting it?
It is a wonderful place to be working at the moment. And, you know, you can see it everywhere. We're doing incredibly well, and we've got such momentum. What I think is key about Publicis is that we demonstrated that when you heavily invest in new technology before they hit the kind of hype cycle, everyone's doing it. When you invest in things like technology, data, AI, you break down the silos around how people use those things, how they collaborate around those things, how you embed it into the end-to-end ways of working. That is how you end up in a position where we are today, where we just have such an advantage. I think we've invested something like 12 billion euro in data tech and AI over the last decade, which our competitors just haven't. And you can see, like, we did it early when we acquired Epsilon several years ago. That was well ahead of what anyone else was doing, which means that now, we're not trying to embed it, we've done it. And we're not trying to change the kind of structure of the group to be able to leverage it. We've done it. We're just now in absolute, this is business as usual ways of working, and just continuing to invest on top of it. And so that's why I think we're in the position we are today. The strategy's paid off entirely.
Well, it's showing as well. And I love the fact as well. And I don't know if this was in relation to when you started at Digitas, but there's a phrase you've said before, which is, I've broken through the glass ceiling. Firstly, I love that, because I've been well known on many podcasts going, if there was a glass ceiling, I never saw it, I smashed my way through it. Hand on heart, I just didn't see it. So I've always felt, in 30 years of working in this industry, didn't exist. Okay, I just went headlong through it. So I really respect you for saying that you've broken through the glass ceiling. But what was it? What stage of your career was that relating to when you said it? And what's the best advice for others for doing just that?
It was when I got to Digitas. So coming to Digitas was quite strategic around that particular issue. So at the time, the CEO of Digitas was a woman. It is again now as well. The CEO of Publicis Media was a woman, and the CEO of Publicis was a woman. So I came in and just went, oh, everyone's a woman. Great. And I think at that point, I then had several years of that, and I had always felt that there was a ceiling where I'd been. And it wasn't so much that people didn't want women to be in the upper echelons. I think it was more, you spend so much time with people you work with, and to find those common points of interest or things that you bond over is quite difficult when I guess there's a group of people that are clearly incredibly similar and you are not. And for me, I'm not on a few different axes, right? Like, I'm a woman of color. And I'd always felt that I was never going to fit in because I was just too different. And I could be smart and it could be skills, but I just didn't fit. And coming to Digitas, I fit. And I came to Digitas in part because I knew I would fit. And that allowed me to spend a couple of years just focusing on the job and nothing else. And a lot of people ask me, how do I progress when I have these different axes of diversity that I feel like other me or hold me back? And my feedback to them is always, go somewhere where you don't notice that about yourself, because you end up spending so much time and effort trying not to be an other and trying to, make yourself fit. And maybe not everyone does, but I certainly did. You spend so much time and energy doing that you don't spend on being the best at your job. And that's doing you a disservice. So go somewhere, and I know it's not always easy, but this is, when you're interviewing, looking around, when you're having different managers, try and find somewhere where you can just solely focus on your craft and your job. And then when you get somewhere where you're senior, which is where I am now, just open it up as much as humanly possible. So it's your job to get senior, and then when you get there, open it up. And we will change the world that way.
I think you're absolutely right. And well, actually, you've made, I think in my introduction, I gave you, I didn't give you them. You earned all those awards and those credits, and you're making a huge impact yourself. So you kind of, you're right, you get into a position of leadership and then you can make change. What is there any areas that you're like, this is where I want to make change, or this is where I have made change?
They're both the same. In STEM, It is an incredibly homogenous place. It's changing, but the statistics still, they're still not great. I imagine a lot of people have read books like Invisible Women. There's loads of other books out there around like discrimination and bias in AI. And this is across the board, across lots of different axes of diversities. I think about a world in 20, 30, 40 years' time where, everything that we exist in the world is powered by data, it's powered by AI. And it is crucial that the people that are building those solutions, be it products, be it decisioning engines, be it services, any of that kind of stuff, from government through to grocery shopping, it's critical that that is representative of the world, because when you don't have that, that's when you end up in a situation where the bias that is inherently in the data that we have, and it is because it's historical data, continues forward. It's when you think about solutions that are, maybe not actively, but unfortunately inherently discriminatory. And that's everything from, how do hairdryers and facial recognition technology deal with darker skin, or pulse oxygen meters, how does that handle darker skin? And not well is the kind of the short answer. How does the medical industry deal with women? How are products targeting women versus non-women? How does services and products create solutions that work for both neurotypical but also neurodivergent people? Like, all of these are questions that, as we're building these solutions and using the data and the AI, we need people in the rooms, we need practitioners doing that work, because otherwise we'll end up in a situation where it doesn't actually work for everyone and it will cost people. So my focus area has effectively to be build a STEM feeder ground and bring as much diversity into STEM as I possibly can, either through talking about it, through using my capability to do just that, and then letting people get senior and then get out, go somewhere else and do the same thing.
You're leading by example, which is really important. The interesting thing is, though, Leila, I have a son and I have a daughter, and it's my daughter who's STEM and my son is a completely creative and not STEM at all. And that's by nature, not nurture. But what I'd love to see, and what I know you're trying to do as well, is saying ultimately everybody's different. And it's not about any other attributes about whether you're naturally good at STEM. I think all we're trying to say is, with any part, is just have those doors open and the same opportunities.
Exactly.
And then they'll come. And also showing by example. I love the fact that people can see. It's much easier if you can see somebody doing it and you see a path.
Absolutely. And, traditionally people have come into STEM via university, and that's changing now because technology is adapting so quickly. I went through a degree, a lot of people in my team came through a degree, but actually it makes a lot of sense now to do things like apprenticeship programs, boot camps, which just opens it up to more people. And there's a lot of stereotypes about the typical data geek, right? Like, we all know what that is in our head.
Are there any attributes of you, Leila, that's a typical data geek?
Look, everyone laughs at me. I'm such an introvert. I'm such an introvert, but everyone's like, but you're not. And I'm like, no, I'm not shy, but I am an introvert at my core. So that one. Yeah. And it's not true. There's loads of extroverts in my capability, which is wonderful.
But that's a good thing about human beings, is luckily we're all made up in bespoke and unique and beautiful ways.
Exactly.
There was something you said, and that was about Digitas or Publicis, and they got in early and they bought in clever tech, and they got in there, really, and they saw the market early. Just on acquisitions, obviously 2026, and touching on acquisitions and the shape of the market, there is always going to be a lot of buying up, but is it better to buy up or build?
So I'll come at it from just a data and to some degree AI perspective. Answer is a bit of both. If there is a true gap in the market where the agency has a role to play and can be an expert, you should absolutely build. Otherwise, I'm almost always going to defer to buy. With that said, we've actually built a solution this year. It's called Model Sight. It allows brands to measure and understand how large language models are perceiving their brands. And, we had this debate early on. Do we buy or do we build this? And we ended up going down the build path because as an agency and as Publicis Group more broadly, we do search, we do media, we do optimization. So this, generative AI optimization absolutely fit in our wheelhouse. There was a huge gap in the market. There were no products that currently truly existed. And we had the ability to build something pretty quickly to get it to market. And we already had clients that were asking for it. So, we'd sold it before we'd fully built it the first time, which is rare. So in that instance, Model Site made absolute sense and it's paid off. It's, been a huge revenue opportunity for us. It's opened up loads of, doors and been hugely successful. On the flip side, we do a lot of reporting and analytics, and there's a question now about, do we build or do we buy a new AI enhanced reporting solution? And some components have made sense for us to build, but actually we're really looking quite a lot at the buy side because it will just get us there faster and cheaper and easier, and it doesn't need to be ours, right? The thing that we bring is the smarts and the people, not so much the technology. So it's very much a case by case basis, but the defer I'd generally go, in my space anyway, I'd probably rather buy and bring the smarts of the people than build. Yeah.
So watch this space 2026 for some buys going on there. But I agree, only build if it's better. Otherwise, buy smart. You've come to my infamous quickfire round, Leila, where I ask you each question. You have to answer the first thing that comes into your mind, and you have to answer it kind of as succinct in a sentence or not. Are you ready, Leila?
Yes.
Okay. On a tough day, what do you trust more, data or intuition?
Intuition, because it's based on all the data of past experiences.
I knew there'd be a curveball back to data. Okay, next question. What's your favorite topic to speak about on a keynote?
Diversity is a competitive advantage.
When was the last time a new technology truly wowed you?
This is large language models.
Okay, yeah.
What they're capable of, how they've changed my life, yeah.
It's clever shit, isn't it? It's amazing. If you weren't working in data, what would you be doing instead?
A house renovation. I'd be a house flipper.
I'm addicted to house programs and renovating. I've got no patience, so can only possibly see myself getting a hoof house, one that's transported in a build. I love watching other people doing it. Leila, what's your least techie hobby?
Gardening.
Oh, beautiful. Good for the mind, good for the soul. What's your prediction? Last two. What's your prediction for the next big acquisition?
Couldn't possibly say.
That's because you know too much. Final question. Who would you love to see on Legends of Adtech? Who do you think is worthy of it coming on this show that you believe is a legend?
Oh, gosh, you stumped me. I would love you to interview the founder of Joan Creative, Lisa Clooney.
Okay.
I think she's fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. You did well. You survived the quickfire round. Leila, thank you so much for being on. And just as a summary, I mean, there was so much takeaways I could have got from what you said there, even in that short space of time. One of the biggest things that came out there is that data is really exciting because it is that end to end. It is in no doubt that it is words, pictures and numbers. It's the power of all three, and data should feed into those elements. And on a personal level or a company, from a human perspective, find your fit within a company. Go somewhere where you fit, where you don't have to battle it, where you automatically fit. And companies, message out to companies, ensure you make space so you can have people of whoever they are, fit well within that company. But there was, honestly, Leila, so much that I could have said there. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
That's a wrap on this episode of Legends of Adtech. And if you'd like to connect to Leila, check out the links in the description. And if you're wondering what just happened or what is happening in AdTech, head over to AdTech Juice, where we continue to help decode our industry. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to rate, review, and share. And of course, be sure to follow to never miss an episode. I'm Julia Linehan. Keep it juicy.
You've been listening to Legends of Adtech, a podcast by AdTech Juice. New episodes drop every 2 weeks, bringing you closer to the pioneers, disruptors, and game changers shaping the future of digital advertising. Stay connected at adtechjuice.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn for even more industry know-how.